the last of 6.7, the real life word problems that are in chapter 6. After this, you should be able to finish all of the 6s on your online, and be careful and make sure you get that done by the deadline that's listed in your notes I sent you earlier. We have two ideas that we're going to talk about here. The first is the idea of simple interest, and the second is the idea of the percent of increase or decrease. There are several kinds of interest that you could be paid in the world. One of them is called simple interest, and it's one of those generic formulas that no matter what you're taking, they expect you to know what this formula is. And it's I equals PRT. I call it the IPERT. Okay? I don't know. That's just what it reminds me of. I is the interest that you're going to be paid. P stands for principal, but all that really is your money. R is your rate, and T is the time that you invest your money in years. And that's really important. It's the time that you invest in years. Okay? So if I want to find the simple interest, how much interest would I make if I put in $1,000 at 2% for 5 years? So I'm going to put my formula. I equals PRT. I don't know my I. My P, if you'll remember, is your money. Well, how much money did you invest? I put in $1,000. So I have 1,000 times my rate is 2%. Remember, you can't multiply that. You have to change it into a decimal. So I move my decimal point and I get 0.02 times, what's your time? How many years did you invest it? 5. So your interest is 1,000 times 0.02 times 5. So if you put that in your little calculator, 1,000 times 0.02 times 5, that should equal 1,100. That's not right. Let me do that again. 1,000 times 0.02 times 5 is 100. Like many of you, I probably need my fingernails cut. So $100 is how much that I would make in interest. Simple? Now, the second idea is what if instead of telling me how many years, I tell you how many months I'm going to invest it. Maybe it's like a savings bond or something like that that you don't put in for a long amount of time. You're going to use the same formula. Okay, I is equal to PERT. Your interest is going to be your principal, which remember is your money, 20,000 times your rate. If I have 3.5%, you have to move it Dr. Pepper twice, 0.035. But this time my time is given to me in months instead of years. So what you need to do is to multiply it times what it says, but since it's month, once I get all of this done, you need to divide it by 12 because there are 12 months in 1 year. So whenever you see the word months, after you do your multiplication, you have to go back and remember to divide it by 12 because you didn't get it for 8 years, you only got it for 8 months. Okay? So 20,000 times 0.035 times 8. And then I take that answer and divide it by 12. And you would get 466.6666. Keeps on repeating. Now, we know that money, interest is money, so money only has 2 decimal places, correct? So you need to go over 2 and decide how to round it. That would be 466.67. And that would be how much simple interest you earned. So, keep your formula, I equals PERT. If your time is given in years, you just multiply it. If it's given in months, you multiply it, but then you have to do this extra step of dividing by 12 to get what your interest would be. The second idea is the idea of percent of increase or percent of decrease. This is especially important for those of you that are going to go into the nursing field. Anytime you're measuring a patient's temperature or you're measuring how the effectiveness of some medicine is, it's real important for you to be able to find the percent of increase and the percent of decrease. Notice it's not just a percent, It's a percent of increase or percent of decrease. Now, by just the words, you know that if it's a percent of increase, it went up. If it's a percent of decrease, it would have gone down, correct? All right. Your basic formula is this. You're going to do it by proportions. We're going to put whatever the percent is over 100, okay? And then we're going to make that equal to the change divided by the beginning. The change, you're going to subtract the two amounts. How much did it change? And then you're going to put that over the beginning, whatever it was to start out with, okay? Now, if you're looking for the percent, quite often this answer is going to be a decimal that you have to change to a percent. Okay? So if they give you this and want to find the percent, remember you're not going to do a proportion here, you're just going to get a decimal probably. All right, an example, two examples. In May, a stock's price was $48. At the end of June, it went up to $54. So I want to know what was the percent of increase. Obviously, it went up. Y'all agree? So I'm going to do my basic thing, okay? My percent is going to be the change. Well, how much did it change? Well, it was 48 and it changed to 54. So if you subtract the two, 54 minus 48, that's going to be a change of 6. So it changed 6. Okay? What was it at the beginning? Well, at the beginning of all of this, what was it? Well, at the beginning it was 48. Okay? So my percent is going to be equal to 6 over 48. Okay? So if you take 6 and divide it by 48, you would get 0.125. But I have to change 0.125 into a percent. So I'm going to move my decimal point, and that would give me 12.5%. Okay? Now, you could have put P over 100 and cross-multiplied and solved it that way, and you wouldn't have to remember how to do the decimal point. Either way is fine. Okay? If I did it that way, I would have P over 100 is equal to 6 over 48. Cross multiply, you'll have 48P is equal to 600, and then divide, and you'll get P is 12.5. Okay, so if you want to do it as a decimal and then move it, you can. If you want to do it as a pure proportion, then that would be easier because then you wouldn't have to remember to move the decimal point. Okay, now notice that this is a 12.5% increase. Okay, quite often it might ask you for was it an increase or a decrease, and you have to be able to tell them that. All right, the second example. Sue weighed 190 pounds. After 2 months of exercise, she weighed 152 pounds. So I want to know what was her percent of decrease. Notice that her weight went down. That's why it's called a percent of decrease. So I'm going to do this one by proportion. Okay, my percent over 100. Okay, now the first thing I have to do is to figure out how much it changed. She went from 190 to 152, so to find her change, I'm going to subtract those. So 190 minus 152 is going to give me 38. So she changed 38. She lost 38 pounds, right? Okay. Then what was it at the beginning? When she started this, what did she weigh at the beginning? She weighed 190. Okay, so here's my proportion. Cross multiply, you'll get 190p is equal to 3,800. Divide by 190, and I get that p is equal to 0.02. Right? 3,800 divided by 1,900. Oh, excuse me, it's 2. So she had a 2% decrease. Okay? When you do it if you use the help me in the book, they change it to a decimal and then changed it to a percent. I think it's easier if you do it as a proportion because then you don't have to worry about moving the decimal point. Notice that in a percent of increase, the smaller one is first because it got bigger. A percent of decrease, the bigger one is first. And that's okay. On the bottom, you have to make sure that you put what was it at the beginning. Okay? Don't worry about positive and negative signs. Okay? good luck. Hope you can finish all of chapter 6 now, and we'll talk to you next week.